I'm trying to figure out what to feel about Washington State this year because everything is going to be different. So I bring on somebody who knows a lot more about the team than myself. Alex Brink, former Washington State quarterback and radio color analyst for the Cougars broadcasts this season. Over 30 transfers making their way to Pullman, Alex, with first-year head coach Jimmy Rogers for a team that has had its ups and downs quite a lot. They've been one of the streakiest teams in college football over the last several years, as you've seen. I mean, the same team that can go out and beat Washington and Texas Tech can also do whatever the second half of last season turned out to be. So coming into this year, their preseason win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, is 5.5. And quite frankly, I don't know if that's right. They have one of the weirdest schedules in the country. And I don't know if 5.5, it could be the best number or it could be the worst number. And I just don't quite know. What have your impressions been so far as we inch closer to kickoff?
Well, I mean, I tell you what, man, like I am the supposed expert. There's no doubt about it. But I am equally as anxious to get to this season as you are to see what this team is all about. I do think that Jimmy Rogers and the new staff bring a lot of energy. I'm excited about that. I just don't know about the personnel, right? You have some holdovers from last year and kind of the previous regime. You have all those transfers you talked about, most of them, a lot of them, tied to South Dakota State, a championship level football team, and Jimmy Rogers. But man, there's a lot of unknowns, and the schedule's one of them for sure. I like this team to win more than 5.5 games if that's where the number's pegged at. Some of that has to do with that schedule, but there's a lot of travel. There is a lot of new faces, new teams, new organizations to face. But I like what I've seen from Jimmy Rogers so far.
What he's trying to do reminds me very much of Curt Cignetti last year at Indiana. And he's not the first coach to do this, where he goes to a new spot and he says, let's bring everybody that I can from my previous stop, even if that's a place that was playing at a lower level of football. Because South Dakota State, obviously, an FCS program that has been phenomenal over the last 5 years or so with multiple national championships. And they were a very good team a season ago. I believe went to the semifinals, right, of the FCS playoffs. And
right.
I look at that and go, well, last year, the James Madison guys went with Curt Cignetti. He brought the quarterback from Ohio, and they went 11-1 in the Big Ten. It wasn't the most brutal Big Ten schedule. It was still a Big Ten schedule. They went 11-1. They beat Michigan, for goodness sake. There is a difference, though, that I can see here, and that's that South Dakota State last year went to Oklahoma State on the road, lost the game. I think it was 47-20, more or less, and I mean, it wasn't the least competitive FCS Power 4 game I've ever seen. Oklahoma State was not very good, though. So that's part of my hesitation, along with quarterback questions about Washington State. Do you think those are fair questions to ask about how it's going to translate when you're going from playing, Montana State, and everybody else that's in, or they're not in their conference specifically, but when you go from that to all of a sudden you're playing at Ole Miss, you're playing Washington at home, who I think is improved amongst, Oregon State twice as well. Like it's a different level. So do you think that's a fair question to wonder?
I think it's a very fair question. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there's realities of, FBS level football to FCS level football for sure. And I think, the one thing I will say is that the athletes that have come with this staff were kind of the cream of then the quarterback who ended up at Iowa, and there are certainly some rave reviews about him so far. Now, they brought a lot of defensive players. I think that really helps. I mean, those defensive players can come in right away on the back end in a system they know and step up. I think in general, if you marry some top-level FCS talent with FBS-level athletes, right, that could step in and they kind of gel together, you get what Indiana got, right? You get what Curt Cignetti got. And I wonder if, Jimmy Rogers and his staff can do the same thing. But you have some questions at the quarterback position. You have Debbie Eckhouse coming back. He had a really nice bowl game, but he was the backup all year, has a ton of experience playing at the FCS level at Bryant before Washington State. But again, you lost a lot of playmakers that went with Jake Dickert. to Wake Forest. You lost Kyle Williams to the NFL draft and the New England Patriots. And so there's a lot of holes personnel-wise that you just don't know. And especially this early in fall camp, we're looking to find out who is going to emerge.
So the schedule for Washington State, I've long described, Alex, as one of the weirdest, maybe the weirdest in all of college football. It's the last year it'll be like this before, the Pac-12 has an actual conference slate to play. But for those who don't have it memorized, most of you, I presume, Idaho, San Diego State, at North Texas, Washington, at Colorado State, at Ole Miss, at Virginia. Like, that stretch of road games is wild. Toledo, at Oregon State, Louisiana Tech, at James Madison, and then Oregon State again. This has to have the greatest number of conference opponents that are in different conferences than any schedule in the history of college football. You've got the MAC, you've got the Sun Belt, the SEC, the Pac-12, the ACC, the Big Ten, the Mountain West, and the Big Sky on the same schedule. So it's strange. It's odd. I think they can wind up around the 500 range, but there are some games on here that some people might look at and go, I don't think that'll be much of a problem. North Texas is not going to be an easy game to go to Denton, and that's a program that, like Washington State, brought in a lot of transfers this offseason. Colorado State's a game I think they could easily lose because the Rams have been a solid program over the last couple of years. Let's put the high-profile ones aside. Like Virginia, not a great ACC team, but still an ACC team. Let's put that one and Ole Miss aside for a moment. When you look at those Mountain West games, where do you feel like Washington State matches up compared to those schools?
Well, it's interesting in general. I think it's a minor miracle the schedule came together at all, right? Like you look at all. I mean, with the Pac-12 falling apart, then the Mountain West scheduling alliance falling apart. The fact that Washington State was able to even piece this together, and I guess that speaks to the two games against Oregon State where you definitely had to piece it together because you needed to find another game, so you just went with the Bees. But I think there's you like you said, you have those higher profile games, but you have some games in there that in past years you would say, hey, that feels like a really winnable game at Colorado State. Going to James Madison, like, gosh, I mean, that's a tough trip also when you talk about going back to the East Coast again, right? And so, you've got a number of games in there that I wouldn't call them toss-ups, but are certainly games, that you don't have a great feel for. North Texas is one that, I think you really alluded to. I think my thought process as I look at those matchups is if this staff, if Jimmy Rogers, Coach Bobbitt, the defensive coordinator, can come in and they can take the pieces that they brought from South Dakota State and match them with returners at the linebacker position, some returners at defensive end. You got a great corner in Jamori Colson. If they can piece together a defense like has that system that they had with Jackrabbits, they're going to be a really tough out anywhere they go. Maybe other than Ole Miss, because that's an obvious, there's some obvious issues with that around team speed and some of the things you get with that Rebel program. But in general, I do think that this defensive system can win and win at a high level and cause problems for teams like Colorado State. They're going to run the air raid and be, relatively consistent in what they do. I think they can go on the road and win again against another air raid team in North Texas, and a team that, Eric Morris, they've seen a lot of similar looks before this. I think a lot of this roster has. So my thing is on offense, we're transitioning, right? As Cougar fans, we're transitioning from this air raid family and Mike Leach and Eric Morris and all these guys and Ben Arbuckle, and we're transitioning to what is now with Danny Freund. We're not quite sure. It was a lot of two-back. It was a lot of multi-tight end when they were at South Dakota State. But if you talk to Coach Freud, which I have, he would say, hey, look at my North Dakota film. When I was coaching in North Dakota and I was calling plays there, a lot of one-back, a lot of spread. We're going to run the football. We're going to have balance, but I am still going to utilize our athletes on the field. And so there's some question marks for me about that offensive system. We're going to find out week one against Idaho. What's that going to look like? Then you have the San Diego State game. I think that'll be a really intriguing matchup because you get San Diego State at home. That's a program that's improving. I think it's a good bellwether early in the season for where Washington State is at. And then obviously you have the Huskies coming into Pullman for the Apple Cup. And that'll really be one where you just say, all right, is this team for real? or do they have a lot to work on? Is there too much change in 1 year? Because the Huskies, like you said, are improved. They still have their own question marks, and the Apple Cup in Pullman is a toss-up no matter what.
I'll give them benefit of the doubt, log my official prediction at 6-6 in a bowl game. But this is such a mystery team to me. Again, the conference affiliation of their opponents go like this, and I'm just doing this off memory, but I'm, as you may be able to tell everybody out there listening or watching, a college football sicko. Big Sky, Mountain West, American, Big Ten, Mountain West, SEC, ACC, MAC, Pac-12, Conference USA, Sun Belt, Pac-12. That is, you know what? That is the greatest schedule in the history of college football. Just because you have hit so many different conferences, dare I say, we'll never see anything like it again. But year one of the Jimmy Rogers era is very close. Alex Brink on the Washington State radio broadcast. He's the analyst. He will have all 12 games to watch in person. Alex, my man, great having you on.